I am a novelist, and I wrote a book about a 12-year-old map maker, which doesn't seem like the most obvious topic. I think sometimes when I say that to people, they kind of give me this curious look, and I can hear them, saying, "Why didn't you write about, something sexy like a detective or a zookeeper or something?" Although I'm not sure a zookeeper is sexy, but to them, it's not an obvious choice why maps might be kind of infinitely rich and evocative, as it is to me. So I thought I would talk a little bit about why I'm fascinated with maps and why I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from maps. So I've titled the talk "Here Be Dragons," and you're probably familiar with this, but in the old days, past the borders of where the map maker knew what was actually out there, they would often include wild and fantastic creatures. So this is a famous map from the 16th century called Carta Marina by a fellow countryman, Olaus Magnus. I'm Scandinavian. And you can see there's the Scandinavian peninsula. And you'll notice to the left here are these crazy walrus-like dragon, sea creatures, and so forth. And this was very common at that time, that you would see these wild creatures that beyond where the map maker knew, you would often see this in Latin. It would say, "Here be dragons." Basically, don't go there or else. Or various iterations were lions known to be here and so forth. And I love this idea, and I love that map makers, even when they knew what was out there, continued to include these wild creatures in the borders of their maps, because for me this indicated the great unknown, and in fact that might be where the most interesting stuff happens. And as a storyteller, what is beyond the borders of the map is what's most interesting. So this is where we were when maps kind of ruled the day. And I want to flash forward to the technological society that we are with our iPhones and so forth, where in a way we've forgotten how to read our maps, the borders of the maps themselves. And I want to give a short video that shows this from the popular American sitcom, The Office. So.
Proceed straight.
Well, we're 0 for 6. Last chance is the Elmhurst Country Club. Other side of the lake on the southeast side.
I don't get it. I really don't get it. I thought this would work. Threw everything I had at that guy, nothing.
That's how it goes sometimes, You lose everything, and everything falls apart, and eventually you die and no one remembers you.
That is a very good point, Dwight.
Make a right turn.
Wait. No. It means bear right.
No,
up there.
It said right. It said take a right.
No, look. It means go up to the right, bear right, over the bridge, and hook up with 307.
Make a right
Maybe it's
turn.
a shortcut, Dwight. It said go to the right.
It can't mean that. There's a lake there.
I think it knows where it is going.
This is the
the
lake.
machine
This
knows.
is the lake.
Stop yelling at me.
No, it's
Stop
up here.
yelling.
There's no road here. Remain calm. I have trained for this. Okay. Exit the window. Here we go.
Make a U-turn, if possible.
Look out for leeches. Michael, are you okay? Swim for it. I got you. Michael. Let go. Let go of me. Come on. I got you. Michael, come on. Go on.
Okay, so clearly those people didn't have a map. And I love how Steve Carell's character says, insistently, the machine knows. And in many ways, I think anyone who's used this GPS, particularly in an unfamiliar environment, we generally haven't studied a map of where we are, and so we're completely in the hands of these. We're helpless to these. And we really, in the back of our minds, we have to say the machine knows. And I think there's a sort of tragedy to that, because in forgetting to look at maps of where we are, we not only kind of forget about where we stand now and where we're going, but we forget about how maps tell us stories about places. This was a map that was on my 8th grade science classroom wall, and most kids went right by it from Bunsen burner to exit. But I think, like all good maps, it tells a kind of series of unfolding stories, unfolding narratives. And it tells it through this intense act of selection, because all maps are highly selective cultural documents. They gain their meaning by giving us just the thinnest pie slice of information of all the information that one could show. In this particular map, it's a little bit dark, but it's the cities at night. And my first reaction to this is looking at this kind of Jackson Pollock smattering of lights. It's more like a pointillism, and thinking this is, in its entirety, is humanity, or at least electricity and capitalism. And the mind kind of boggles to that. If you can see over there, it might be dim, but those few pixels, that's Tokyo, and that's 25 million people going about their business, riding their bicycles and cooking noodles and getting in arguments. And the mind kind of flexes and is in awe of that crunch of humanity down in those few illuminated pixels. And I guess my second reaction on top of that is, oh my God, we're destroying this world. And what will this map look like in 50 years, 100 years? We will have found ways to expand that ever increasing blob of lights to those dark places. And then I guess my third and lingering reaction to the map is, what is going on in those dark places? Because there aren't many left, right? There's the Amazon and Sahara and Africa and the innards of Australia and the Himalayas and Siberia, but those will find ways to live there. And it turns out I'm not alone in wondering this. One of my favorite novels in all of its complexity is Conrad's Heart of Darkness. And Marlowe, the protagonist, says, "Now when I was a little chap, I had a passion for maps. I would look for hours at South America or Africa or Australia and lose myself in all the glories of exploration. At that time, there were many blank places on the earth, and when I saw one that looked particularly inviting, but they all look like that, I would put my finger on it and say, when I grow up, I will go there." And unlike Marlowe, I didn't go to the Congo, but I did have this very outdated National Geographic Atlas. It was the one with the burgundy textured cover. And I would just sit for hours looking at this map and kind of studying it, and even just going through the index and marveling at the number of X names in China. But I was particularly drawn to the islands page. I don't know if you remember this page, but it was taking these scattered islands all across the Pacific and for your viewing pleasure, wonderfully bordering them with this beautiful white border and just collecting them there. And I would stare at these things because I think there's something about a map like this. Penrhyn. Has anyone been to Penrhyn? I've shown this map to many people around the world, and no one has been to Penrhyn or heard of it. So I wonder if National Geographic just kind of slipped it in there. You know, how the A to Zs would put like one mistake in their maps just to make sure that if anyone copied them, they would know that it's from them. But I love this map because it gives you just enough to sink your teeth into, and then it almost begs you for your imagination to fill in the stories around this kind of this atoll, I believe you call it. But like, for instance, the name Takua Passage with 2 U's. I see that and I wonder what has passed through the Takua Passage, and what is a passage, and what's the difference between a passage and a channel, and who comes up with these nautical definitions, and my kind of brain starts spinning. And that lovely lilting Ngorongoro of that sliver of an island. It's like a man with a limp, you know. And I wonder what has crashed on Ngorongoro, and what's buried there, and who lives there, and even the syrupy name Lagoon with a double O that has comes pre-built in our culture with that kind of wonder. We think of lovers meeting amongst waves and kissing each other and slapping each other, you know, in the kind of borders of the lagoon. And so I think this map, like great maps, gains its power by giving it just enough, and then nothing more. And the magic happens, as it does when we read great stories, away from the page, outside of the borders of the map. And so whenever I'm telling stories, I always think about how much do I need to give my reader, and then where do I stop and allow their imaginations to take over. I think that's the most powerful thing as a storyteller, allowing the reader to do most of the heavy lifting. Maps can also tell stories by not giving us any labels at all. And I stumbled across this map, and it's very familiar. We see the states and we see the counties, but there's a gradation here. And because the gradation is not labeled, my mind starts spinning. What could this be? Has this incredible frequency in Albuquerque in northern Maine? And it's probably a bad idea, but I usually turn to Florida for answers. So whatever this thing is, there's a great lack of it in Florida. So, is this ski equipment purchased, or does anyone have an idea? We're all friends here. There's no wrong answers. Be imaginative. Political common sense. You trust the Northern Mainers, huh? Anything else? I showed this map to someone and they said broccoli eating, which I kind of appreciate. What? Noodle consumption. Broccoli and noodle consumption. So one of the aspects I love about humans is that we tend to project our personal experiences onto the larger human race. And it's a great quality that we have, as long as we recognize that we're doing it. So I've only been to Albuquerque once in my life, and it was probably for 6 hours. And while I was there, I saw a mother with triplets, and they were on a kind of child leash. I don't know if you've seen these. The third triplet, the poor girl, she was the slowest of the bunch, and she was kind of getting yanked along at the bottom. So I left Albuquerque with the clearly erroneous belief, but nonetheless I bought into it, that there was probably an abnormal rate of tripletism in Albuquerque. That this was a very common sight in Albuquerque. And so when I saw this map, my first reaction was, oh, this must be rates of tripletism. And in these dark counties, triplets far outnumber single births. And so, of course, because I have an overactive imagination, I assembled this montage of what tripletism would look like in these counties. So this would be your standard baby picture, right? And if there was any less than 3 kids on the rocking horse, they would be, your neighbor would say, "I'm so sorry." And architecture and design would have to be subtly influenced all kinds of ways. You'd have to have 3 seats in waiting rooms and gas stations, or else some child would have to sit on the floor. Department stores would catch on. Fashion, that looks like it was one shirt at one time, I guess. Bicycles. Weddings, marry your $3 off at one time. It's more cost effective in these wintry economic times. And even cemeteries would, catch on. But then something funny happened, which is that I found the actual caption to the map. And I'm fascinated by this act of captioning things. It's a very powerful weapon that you wield if you pair text with image. I'm sure you've seen this in your various forums. For some reason, it bypasses all my critical faculties. I mean, when I'm reading an article, I'm like, I'm skeptical. But somehow, the image next to it with the text beneath it, I'm like, oh, that is a drunk zebra giving birth. And I don't question that at all. So just notice your own brain as you see this map with the caption. And first of all, note how this parallel world of tripletism evaporates. It's gone. But also notice the unfolding series of questions that comes with this new caption. Rates of stomach cancer in white females, age adjusted by county, 1950 to 1969. So of course, when I see this map with this caption, I have a whole other set of questions, which is, if you geographically mapped other types of cancer, would there be a similar correlation, or is stomach cancer unique in where it showed up? What about black females or white males? Would there be also a similar correlation, or was it just specific to gender and race? And have things changed since 1969 is my other question. I showed this map to an epidemiologist friend of mine, and I love how maps can tell different stories to different people. He saw this map and he said, oh, it makes total sense. He said the #1 cause of gastrointestinal cancer, which by the way, prior to 1950 was the leading cause of cancer in this country, was improperly salted fish, improperly cured fish, and also lack of refrigeration for foods. And so he said, again, those are my people in northern Wisconsin and Minnesota. They love their salted fish and developed a lot of stomach cancer because of that. But once refrigeration became very popular in the home, gastrointestinal cancer plummeted and was replaced by lung cancer, in part because our government handed out cigarettes to the soldiers. Thank you. I also love maps. They can tell these kind of larger cultural narratives, but they can also tell very specific and personal narratives. And I collect napkin maps for this very reason. And I love this map in particular because one of the things it exhibits is that the map maker clearly ran out of room. And that last quarter of an inch probably represents 17 miles. But this happens to the best of us, right? Even you architectural gurus and designers, that we kind of misjudge how much room we have. And I love the spontaneity of napkin maps. I love that kind of translation, immediate translation of our personal geography onto the page. And I love the ambiguity and the vulnerability built into these directions here. It says, go through Lanark, then you get to a four-way, go straight until you get to another four-way, then you can see Lena, but I'm not sure if you go straight or turn right. I love, halfway through the directions, clearly this map maker realized he had no idea where he was going, but he was going to admit that to you, and I love him for that, That said, this map is, as I said, is a very highly culturally specific document that includes some specific things. So what does it include? It includes Milledgeville High, shortened to Mill High, which for me is an indication this might be a high schooler, particularly because of the inclusion of parking lot. If you can remember back to your own high school experiences, the parking lot in the Great American Public High School was the place where the magic happened. So the inclusion of that as the starting point, to me, is a big clue. Directional arrows, directions, one could argue if they are helpful, various roads, Lanark School, a restaurant, a stop sign. This map does not include many things, almost by definition, and thank God, because if it included everything, it would stop being a useful document. So I just took a couple of seconds to enumerate some of the things that aren't on this map. Bicycle shops, bicycle paths, yarn shops, dentist office, bank robber, hideouts, locations of first kisses, where blood has been spilled. And of course, you go through this whenever you represent any kind of building or design. You're going through this very same process of given all that is out there, what do I choose to represent on the page? Because that's a powerful, powerful process, and it can make or break your project, obviously. But as I see this list, of course, I think of all these ghost maps, possible ghost maps of Milledgeville floating off the page. So, for instance, potential Frisbee golf holes and traffic patterns. We would see that place in a whole new way. And I love that about maps. If you see a map of your hometown or of your home or even of your bedroom, if it's done well, you will never see that place in the same way. It will reveal some kind of underground secret that forever changes your perception, which is, I think, any diagram or any drawing that we have, that's the burden that we're facing. We should want to change the perception of our viewers' home, our viewers' future home, so that they will never see it in the same way. Our good friend Borges took this notion of the impossibly accurate one-to-one representation in his wonderful story on exactitude in science. And he said, in that empire, the art of cartography attained such perfection that the map of a single province occupied the entirety of a city, and the map of the empire, the entirety of a province. In time, those unconscionable maps no longer satisfied, and the cartographers' guilds struck a map of the empire whose size was that of the empire, and which coincided point for point with it. And when I read this, first of all, I feel really bad for the people of the empire. They have this kind of impossibly accurate map lying on their shoulders, and they get osteoporosis and rickets. And the story goes on to say that this map was obviously useless. It was perfectly accurate, but no one could use it. So it was cast out into the deserts beyond, where you can still find tattered remains of it, and wolves and hobos take refuge in it. So I love that. And this brings me, in a kind of roundabout way, to my other great love. Well, first, this is a famous map of people who did not heed Borges or the other, this was an attempt to make an impossibly accurate map, which was essentially, if you tripped and fell on the sidewalks of New York and you wanted to sue the city, you had to demonstrate that that crack or that irregularity was there prior to you tripping. So the New York Trial Lawyers Association, smelling blood, hired 600 cartographers to go around and map every single sidewalk of the city, and this is about 60,000 miles of sidewalk, and mapping every single little crack they could find. And they would present it to the city on January 1 every year. And so when you tripped, you could be like, see, I told you so, just look at the Big Apple pothole map, which it came to be known. And this pissed off the city because if you will look, I've blown this up already many times and we'll blow it up again. The closer you get, the more kind of weird and abstract it gets. It's almost like, if you get close enough, this like Indian hieroglyphics, And that circle with the line through it could be the make or break, like $1 million lawsuit. And then the city was like, we can't tell what is going on here. So I love this kind of, it's almost a romantic, naive belief that we could map every little crack and particle in New York, and yet we still try to do this. So this brings me to my other great love, which is the diagram. And every time I fly, I always check the safety manual that's tucked inside my seat and checking the quality of graphics. And I love diagrams. I think we're drawn to them for two reasons. One, they lend a sort of simplicity and sequentiality to what would otherwise, in this case, be a very tricky time, right? All you have to do, dear passenger, is follow this four-step process. Take the bag comes down, separate the mask from the bag, put the elastic band over your head, breathe normally, don't smoke while you breathe normally, and then attend to your child who has been patiently waiting in the oxygenless environment for you to do your business. But I think we also love the diagram precisely because we know this would be a very tricky time, and that this diagram, in all of its lovely sequentiality, cannot possibly map or diagram the chaos that this would be, the chaos that is life. And lurking behind this very simple diagram is a diagram that's basically tilted downward, pointed downward and on fire, because we would be racked by guilt. If we were in this particular situation, we would wonder, had I turned off my stove, am I a good person? All these things would be going through our mind. So there's a sort of shadow diagram that's, you may not know it, but it's there and you sense it, and I think you love it. I think you love that this diagram is lurking behind there. So I know I'm basically out of time, but very quickly, I just wanted to shoot through. Right after 9/11, the U.S. government created the Homeland Security Division, and they also had this clearinghouse of information called ready.gov, which anyone could go to, and it had very useful information like, store extra batteries, and if your garage fills with terrorists' biological fluid, open your garage door, and very practical stuff. But it also had these weird, headless, totally decontextualized diagrams, and I think they were without language because they were meant to supersede language, and if you didn't speak English, you were supposed to be able to understand them as well. But if captioning is a very powerful act, so is decaptioning, which sounds like a lot of architectural websites have done this. And so look at these, grade A USDA certified diagrams and see if you feel safe or informed at all. I know I'm overusing the fire, but I love that kind of reveal. So take yourself back to 2002. We know we're on this technology kick. People were just really discovering the internet and realizing that the internet was more effective than yelling. They could post something and everyone would read it, and it was really cool. So the internet ate these up like candy, and very quickly this democratic caption contest came about, and people assigned their own captions for these, which I love. This is a beautiful process. So I'm just giving you just a couple, and then I'll stop. But these are the people's captions here. And I love this guy with the matching blue hair and trousers. He's a great actor, and his commitment, like his pensive, chin rest, he's not being paid enough, clearly. And again, I think this is made by the kind of Cary Grant the hip thrust standoff between the box and you. But of course, this caption does not address the shockingly specific 5 minutes and 12 seconds pointed at your head, which what happens at 5 minutes and 13 seconds? So, to bring it to a conclusion, I think when you are thinking about any design project or any map or diagram or whatever you're doing, always think about what is happening beyond the borders, because that's really where the magic happens. You can include a lot on the page, and sometimes you don't want to include too much on the page, because that's where your viewer kicks in. And as a storyteller, I'm always thinking about where does my job stop and where does my reader's job begin? And often, that's the most important breaking point. So if you are interested, there's a couple of copies left, and I'd be happy to give you one or sell you one. So thank you so much.